Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, this is from ICSA, Cult Information since 1979. Children's and Cults. Excerpt from Recovery from Cults, Help for Victims of Psychological and Spiritual Abuse by W. W. Norton, New York, 1993, 410 pages. Hardcover. So I'm obviously not reading the whole entire thing. Just going to read this part of it. Michael Langone, Gary Eisberg. This chapter 17 will examine the capacity of cultic and related authorities and groups to harm children, physically and psychologically. The groups with which we are concerned are exploitatively manipulative and threaten children because they A. live by an absolutist ideology that dictates harsh physical discipline and or the rejection of medical intervention. Sound familiar? B. Function as closed, often physically isolated societies which resist any investigation of possible child abuse. And C. Use religious beliefs, like policies, which aren't really a religion, but to justify their ideology and reclusive nature. Their absolutist ideology provides a rationalization for child abuse. KRs, ethic handlings, child RPF, physical abuse, neglect. Their limited interaction with members of mainstream society, e.g., members who don't visit doctors. Children attend group-run schools, like the Cadet Org, like the Delphin Academy, like the Scientology schools that are in New Mexico and Florida right now, Mays Kingsley Ranch. Tends to close off the normal means by which authorities learn about child abuse and neglect. Unless you got police officers that are complicit and go along with it. Maybe they abuse their own children, who knows? Their religious nature, or fake religious, magnifies their capacity to avoid scrutiny because they can invoke the First Amendment. How many times have we heard that in Scientology? In order to curtail investigative efforts. For these reasons, raising the question of child abuse in cults is not analogous, as some have suggested, to asking about child abuse in Episcopalians or Catholics or Baptists. The social structure and psychological dynamics of mainstream religions simply do not incline them toward child abuse and neglect as do the structures and dynamics of cultic groups. Not surprisingly, child protection authorities cannot easily measure the scope of the problems these cults pose. Scientific literature on child abuse in cultic groups is almost non-existent. Official investigations cover only a handful of extreme cases in which the death of a child served as a stimulus to governmental action. Nearly all of the other available information comes from individual court cases about which newspaper reports are the only readily available sources of information. An early survey of such reports can be found in Landa 1984. Consequently, it is impossible to estimate the extent of the problem with any confidence. Moreover, the connection between a group's practices and child abuse and neglect is not always clear. Nevertheless, on the whole, the evidence is sufficiently compelling to warrant examination. Much more research must be conducted, however, before we can draw confident conclusions about the relationship between cultic groups and child abuse and neglect. This chapter will try to make the best of the unfortunate situation. We will first examine the psychological dynamics that make cultic groups especially prone toward child abuse and neglect. We will then describe the types of harm that have been observed in cultic and related groups. Lastly, we will offer some thoughts on treatment issues pertaining to children coming out of cultic groups. Psychological dynamics. Markovitz and Halperin, 1984, provide the most complete and compelling explanation of why child abuse and neglect is likely to be associated with cultic groups. First of all, because the groups are centered on the personality of a charismatic leader, L. Ron Hubbard. The leader's idiosyncratic beliefs, no matter how mundane, may influence the group's child-rearing practices. Like parenting classes? Because these groups' ideologies tend to be non-falsifiable, subjectivist systems that are threatened by the outside world, like the WOG world, pardon me for saying that, ideology must be treated as sacred and unchallengeable. This feature becomes especially destructive with regard to children, in that, as Markovitz and Halperin 1984 note, there is a primacy of ideology over biology. Childcare may be seen as a disposable superfluity. The cult's hierarchical structure and its setting itself up as a family, turn parents into middle management with regard to their own children, how they discipline their children, what activities encourage in their children, what they teach their children. Such decisions are dictated by the group's leader. The parents' role as middle managers can become especially dangerous for children when the leader measures the parents' dedication to him by their willingness to abuse their children at his request. Landa, 1990-91. In addition, the parents' dependence on the leader, the either-or mentality of the group, it's us versus them, just like Pink Floyd, of the group, and the frequency with which members are subjected to oscillating rewards and punishments. Ethics handlings, RPF, in conjunction with group strictures against dissent, result in a great deal of suppressed anger. Parents may then vent their frustrations on their children. Such projection of anger becomes even more destructive when the group's doctrine emphasizes harsh physical discipline, i.e., spare the rod, spoil the child. Types of harm. The child abuse and neglect to be described in this section, which offers only conspicuous documented examples, is broken down into two categories: medical neglect and physical abuse and neglect. We do not separately discuss psychological abuse because, as the previous chapter implied, it is an inherent feature of the cultic structure. Nor do we discuss indirect cult influences on children, such as cult-sponsored programs being taught in the public schools, or deleterious influences on cult children that are not necessarily physically or medically harmful, e.g. custody disputes, developmentally inappropriate educational programs like Children of God. The information base for these two areas is limited, and the problems they pose are not as directly linked to the psychological and social dynamics of cults as are abuse and neglect. We have located only one study that systematically examined the question of children in cults. Gaines, Wilson, Redican, and Baffy, 1984, surveyed 70 ex-cult members in order to determine the effects of cult membership on the health status of current and past members, including children, page 13. Among their findings relevant to the treatment of children were the following. 27% of the respondents said children in their group were not immunized against common childhood diseases. Oh, sorry guys. 23% said children did not get at least 8 hours of sleep at night. 60% said their groups permitted physical punishment on children. 13% said that children were sometimes physically disabled or hurt to teach them a lesson. Oh, is that sad? Oh. Wally Hanks, anyone? 13% said that the children were sometimes 13% said the punishment of children was sometimes life-threatening or required a physician's care. Well, you know, they don't let children see their doctor in Scientology. And in the rare cases that they might take a child to the doctor, it's because they think that the child's going to, pass on. So it's more like not caring for the child. It's just covering up their criminality. 61% said families were encouraged to live together and share responsibilities. Well, that's definitely not Scientology, but they completely dismantle the family in Scientology. Make the children live with adults. It's just, 37% said that children were seen by a doctor when ill. Well, you guys know. Medical neglect. Swan, 1990, examined more than 100 legal cases in which religious beliefs against medical care impacted on children. In dozens of these cases, children died. Listen to that, you guys. Moloch. Although not all of these cases involve groups commonly considered to be cults, most were associated with the Christian Science Church. I think it happens in Scientology too. Cults can and do take advantage of religious immunity. That's all they ever, when you listen to them, it's all they ever screaming all the time. We have the right to let our children die. Pertaining to health care, against which Swan and the American Academy of Pediatrics have protested. Pediatricians urge exemption repeal. Cult Observer. I don't know. They've never won. You guys know why. March, April, page 8 from Pediatricians Fight. Church Limit on Care. Pediatrics, January 6, 1988. Even though religions do not have absolute immunity, they are in large measure shielded from official scrutiny. Wonder why that would be. Inquiring minds want to know. Don't you guys want to know? The Fort Wayne, Indiana News Sentinel had a series of investigative articles on the Faith Assembly, an ultra-fundamentalist sect that shuns medical care and was then led by now late Hobart Freeman I really wonder about that name. I don't know. This group had a maternal death rate nearly 100 times that of the state average, misogyny, and a perinatal death rate nearly 3 times the state average. I believe these people are sacrifices. I do. Prenatal and maternal mortality in a religious group in Indiana, June 1st, 1984. As early as 1984, the News Sentinel had documented the deaths of 84 people who died after they or their parents followed the sex teachings. Like, don't go to the doctor. Zlatos, June 20th, 1984. Despite a series of legal investigations, this figure climbed to more than 103 deaths. From the Faith Assembly, please, Cult Observer. I'm going to stop reading the citations. That gets me so off. Among the deaths reported on in the story were a 5-month-old boy, son of a man who had dropped out of a medical residency, to join the group. Okay, so that's a different person, who died of bacterial meningitis, normally a treatable disease. And 103rd identified death, an infant boy who died of untreated pneumonia. That's terrible to me. These fairly recent deaths occurred despite a string of similar deaths in the same group. For example, in 1984, a 9-month-old girl died from untreated bacterial meningitis, and a 26-day-old infant died of untreated pneumonia. Justin Barnhart, a 2-year-old boy whose parents belonged to the Faith Tabernacle, died of a Wilms tumor because his parents relied on prayer rather than medicine. Or what is that they call in Scientology, which I don't think is a religion, a touch assist? Experts at the parents' trial testified that medical intervention is successful against Wilms tumors more than 90% of the time. Wow. And then they list the citation. Another child of a Faith Tabernacle family died in 1991 of dehydration and malnutrition. Just like Lisa McPherson, even though she was an adult. Because he couldn't keep nourishment down. That's so sad. After contracting ear and sinus infections, in 1981, parents in the same group were convicted of manslaughter for letting their son die of highly treatable cancer. A judge refused to order medical examination for the couple's 9 surviving children because of the state's religious exemptions. I'm sorry, I usually want people to have freedom, but when it comes to this, I don't agree with that. In 1990, 6 Philadelphia children whose parents were associated with the Faith Tabernacle of First Century Gospel Church died of complications from measles. It's like you're going back in time with these people. With one exception, the children could have been saved with medical care, according to a local health official. Of 900 measles cases during a 6-month period in 1990, 492 took place among members of 2 sects that run schools with hundreds of unvaccinated students. You guys know the agendas, though, you know. In 1986, John Ibarger was convicted of felony child abuse for denying medical care to his seriously ill 5-week-old daughter who died of pneumonia. Libar Sayre and his wife were found of a group called Jesus Through John and Judy, which, that doesn't scream cult, which held that Jesus should be their only doctor. Convicted in daughter's death. Not all cases come to the attention of authorities involve deaths. The following report from the Cult Observer is a telling example of how limited are the actions of courts when seemingly well-intentioned parents allow their children to suffer or die because of their religious beliefs. I don't know if they're well-meaning or well-intentioned. Charles and Marley Myers, members of the End Time Ministries. Isn't it great how all of these cults kind of have the same doctrines? I mean, a lot of them. In Lake City, Florida, were charged with child abuse in December for their failure to seek treatment for their 16-year-old son, who almost died before heart surgery to remove a tumor. End Timers believe exclusively in faith healing. I'm just thinking rest in peace to, whom was it, Jet Travolta, who never got his medicine that he needed for seizures. Although other members in several states have died in such circumstances, this is the first time a member has been charged with a crime. Before his operation, young William Myers, unable to eat, had lost 30% of his weight, and was suffering from liver and kidney failure. In October, a physician from the Child Protection Team said William, whom he described as if he had been living in a concentration camp, he was at great risk of death, not only from his cardiac lesion, but also from the complications of long-term malnutrition. Wow. The Myers, who say they feel they made a grave mistake in not seeking medical treatment, add that they did not realize the severity of their son's condition. In April, the Myers' newborn grandson died from the massive hemorrhaging when their daughter and her husband, I think they're supposed to say refused to get medical treatment for the infant. The inquest judge ruled that the religious shield protected the couple from criminal prosecution. You guys really need to ask yourself, why is this? Why is this allowed? Moloch. It's my opinion. In March of 1992, the Florida Supreme Court threw out the murder convictions of two end-time parents whose comatose 7-year-old daughter had died after they treated her with spiritual healing. It was the first time a state's high court has overturned the criminal conviction of parents who cited religious beliefs in denying a child's medical care. The court said Florida law did not give the couple fair warning that they could be prosecuted if they relied solely on prayer. Also reversed was a probation stipulation that the parents seek conventional medical care for their other children. Only 3 days after this decision, two other end-time parents were found guilty by a Live Oak jury of felony child abuse nearly 2 years after their severely handicapped daughter died of pneumonia without medical care. Physical abuse. In his book, Children of Jonestown, child advocate and journalist Kenneth Wooden investigated child abuse in Jim Jones People's Temple, Wooden States. Physical abuse of the young was part of the routine at People's Temple. As Jones began to exercise control, children were beaten if they failed to call him father. Oh, it's horrible. Or were otherwise disrespectful, or if they talked with peers who were not members of People's Temple. See, the reason they don't want children talking to people outside is because people outside will try to help the children. Belts were used at first, then were replaced by elm switches, which in turn were replaced by the Board of Education, a long, hard piece of wood swung by 250-pound Ruby Carroll. So that's sadist stuff, you guys. It's sick. A People's Temple member described the escalation of punishments children faced. Mild discipline gave way to making young girls strip almost nude. There's that sadism. Remember I told you guys about that. There was this man who was talking about his sexual abuse at a Catholic orphanage in, I believe, England or Ireland. And they would make all of the children strip buck naked in front of them, and then they would whip them because they got off on it. It's sick. Mild discipline gave way to making young girls strip almost nude in front of the full membership and then forcing them to take cold showers or jump into the cold swimming pool at the Redwood Valley Church. Unequal boxing matches gave way to beatings with paddles. Then electric shock. You guys know where electric shock comes from. Satanic ritual abuse. Facts. And finally, something Jones called a blue-eyed monster, which hurt and terrorized the younger ones in a darkened room. Wow. Like that they'd go to that length. Sick. Do you guys think the movie Monsters, Inc. came from nothing? I would love to do a video on that, but I can't because the whole channel will be taken down. But there's a lot of symbolism in there. It's really sick stuff. These abuses occurred while the People's Temple was in California, of course, and regularly winning praise from newspapers and politicians. What do you guys think? Hello? Ring-a-ding-a-ding. Is it making sense now? Is it all making sense now? The men writing this article, they knew, but they couldn't talk about it. Allegations of child abuse in the House of Judah, an ultra-fundamentalist Michigan sect, resulted in the removal of 62 children. Imagine this. Imagine if this could happen to Scientology children. From a camp run by the sect, 62 youths taken away from religious camp, New York's Time, July 9th, 1983. This action was prompted by the death of a 12-year-old boy who was beaten to death for refusing to do his chores. Oh my God. That's a monster. That is a monster that did that. Monster. These nutritionally healthy bodies have been moderately to severely injured by repetitive beatings and other physical insults. Of the first 50 to 55 children examined by a physician, this also reminds me how Serge Delmar talks about why Scientology doesn't want the children looked at by the doctors, mandated reporters. By a physician after John's death, a full 20% had signs of severe physical abuse. You see, a lot of these people are monsters, man. They're just monsters. They love that power and control. And children are such easy targets. For the children greater than 5 years of age, this percentage increases to approximately 40%, and for boys in this range, the figure is 70-75%. Oh, is that sad? Thus, the likelihood of a male child reaching adolescence without showing physical signs of severe physical abuses to his body is less than 25%. And the sad thing about it is if he stays in that cult, a lot of them will become the same. House of Judah leader William A. Lewis was convicted along with 7 other members of the group. Imagine that. Homeland Security. How come the Scientologist abusing the children the same way can't get arrested? For enslaving children and holding 12-year-old John Yarborough in involuntary servitude until he was beaten to death in 1983. Oh my God. So that's what it took for someone to do something. Leaders and members sentenced, and that was in 1987. From 7 sect members get prison terms. Minneapolis Star and Tribune, December 20th, 1986. Lewis is now out of jail. Listen to that, you guys. You got to read between the lines. This guy knew what was up. Lewis is now out of jail and has created a new community of 70 people in rural Alabama. You guys know. You know. You know, you know, you know. The Northeast Kingdom Community Church, which has branches in Island Pond, Vermont, and Clarks Harbor, Nova Scotia, was the subject of much controversy during the mid-1980s. On June 22, 1984, Vermont state authorities raided the sex houses and took 112 children into custody, intending to examine them for signs of abuse. So that, see right there, you guys, when you hear these crappy newspaper articles about, oh, there were no signs of abuse, you know, of the sexual abuse, you know what they can do with that shit. But a district judge, listen, here we go. I don't want to snap out, you guys, because you know I want to. But a district judge found the action grossly illegal. You see that shit, you guys? When you got physical evidence of children being abused, the judge found it grossly illegal. You guys know, you know. And ordered the children returned to their homes to get abused some more. Do you guys, is it kind of making sense to you guys right now why the evildoers want to get rid of the G's? You know, you guys know what I mean by the G's. Fortunately, the group apparently instituted changes in its practices, including the registering of births, that's a law, and seeking of outside medical help. That greatly lessened the reports of child abuse. And I'll bet you like the good old boys were freaking surrounding them. And ultimately led to a relative acceptance by the local community. That was in 1989. Yeah, they were gonna do it, or else you know what was gonna happen. And the audacity that the judge said that was grossly illegal. Unreal. The leader of a controversial group in Quebec, Roque Moise Therault, received a 2-year prison sentence for beating a child to death and burning and burying the body. What does that sound like to you guys? You know what it sounds like to me? That sounds like a ritual. Yes. You know what he got for it? You know what he got for it? Remember, they want to take our G's away. He got 2 years jail. You know, you know, you know. Having served his sentence, the leader then set up another base in Ontario. This guy writing it, the two men writing it, they're trying to give us a hint here. I know. So after killing a child, he was able to set up another base in Ontario, from which 14 children were removed due to further charges of child abuse. Ask yourself why that would be. Now is it becoming clear why they use all this symbolism?
Of the so-called Illumined, they're the so-called Illumined.
The Stars and Stripes, a military newspaper in Europe, described a taped sermon by preacher Darrell Dunn. The tape tells parents when disciplining children to break their will. That reminds me of Aleister Crowley. To blister their bottom red, to brainwash them. Is it making sense now, you guys? To spank weeks-old babies. Go read that Fritz Springmeier book, man. I'm telling you. It's not for the faint of heart. And reassure them that little blue bruises are a positive sign from the Lord. Wow. They do this to stay in control, you guys. The evildoers. An Indian man, believing that scripture-based child rearing demanded that a child should be whipped until... Wait, did I read that already? No. Until his will was broken, beat his 3-year-old son to death. Oh my God. The beating that killed Bradley Lonadeer was one of many and only part of the torture that the Lonadeers inflicted on the boy, alleging at the urging of Stephen Jackson, the head of Covenant Community Fellowship. Sick 3-year-old little boy. In 1986, 15 members of the Yahweh Temple of the Black Hebrew Israelites, well, you guys know, were charged with ritualistic beatings and child torture. 5 children placed under protective custody by authorities told how they were hit with switches, rods, and other items in bizarre ritualistic beatings. In 1990, the United States District Court in Fort Smith, Arkansas, awarded over $1 million to Robert Miller and his family, all formerly associated with evangelist Tony Alamo. A key charge in the suit involved the assertion that Tony Alamo put on public exhibitions of corporal punishment in the form of paddling upon minor children. And the proof amply showed that Cody Miller, while being restrained by 4 adult men, oh my God. I mean, this is more severe, but it does remind me of that whole Wally Hanks thing. They want to break the will. Was struck vigorously 140 times with a large wooden paddle by a grown man. I don't know how old that Cody Miller was. Oh my God, sick people. All for power. So that's what all this is sick. The evidence further showed that this punishment was inflicted in a room filled with adults and children. It was not only painful, Cody's buttocks were bleeding, but humiliating in the extreme. One of the adult witnesses to the event, indeed one of the principal participants, was Cody's mother. Can you believe that these SOBs call themselves religious? They're the ones who need to be sacrificed. In 1984, Ariel Ben Sherman, leader of the Good Shepherd Tabernacle in Salem, Oregon, was charged with 5 counts of child abuse. Imagine that, you guys. Sherman was accused of having children from the religious commune tied up and handcuffed, confined in dark areas, suspended by ropes from ceiling hooks. Oh my God. And deprived of food, water, and sanitary facilities. I know what someone deserves that does that. Sometimes children are exploited economically as well as physically abused. For example, Eldridge Broussard, the founder of the disbanded Ecclesia Athletic Association, and 7 of his followers were indicted in 1991 in Portland, Oregon, on charges of enslaving children and denying them their civil rights. Scientology, anybody? Hello? The government said that Broussard forced the group's children to be part of an exhibition team that participated in Ranrung and other athletics. Oh, they were like selling like shows and showcased them to gain corporate sponsorships. Oh my God. And money. Star Search, anyone? All the while systematically beating them, depriving them of food, and subjecting them to overcrowding and poor schooling. Wow. Reports of magazine sales organizations abusing children and controlling them through cultic techniques have surfaced from time to time. One case involved a 19-year-old girl who worked 6 days a week from 9 a.m. to as late as 2 in the morning, earning as little as $7 a day. Well, geez, where have we heard that one before, you guys? Huh. Less on days she failed to meet her quota. Such youngsters are typically discouraged from contacting their parents and threatened when they say they want to go home. Larry Williams of Parent Watch in New York City, where are all these people now, estimates that as many as 30,000 children may be lured to such organizations. You guys know this is from back in the day. Teens say magazine sales jobs like slavery. Wow. Wow, you guys. Wow. It is not surprising that sexual abuse will sometimes accompany physical abuse. Of course, I was waiting for this. The Swiss periodical Sonntagsblick told of 20 children of God. Well, we know. Children of God, just bad. Youngsters living, and it's still up, by the way. Isn't that great? Living isolated from other people without schooling, in a house due to being demolished, in a rural Zurich parish. There have been claims that sect girls were sometimes driven across the border to Germany to go on the street. Abern Children's News Agency reported the case of a 12-year-old girl from the group who was admitted to a hospital suffering severely from VD. See why they didn't want the children in the hospitals? Janie's got a gun. Janie's got a gun. What did her daddy do? Avron Shreve, 61, leader of a purportedly polygamous sect, pleaded guilty to sexually abusing 4 girls under the age of 14 in northern Utah. Oh, off on a different topic. I watched a video yesterday that apparently the lead singer of the Chili Peppers, he openly admitted to R-ing and hurting like young girls. He openly admitted to it. I don't know if he actually said the R word, but it sounds like it. I don't really want to read his book, but that's the mentality and audacity of these people. The 28-year-old son of Connecticut cult leader Julius Schachnow was indicted for sexually assaulting children of families in the 100-member group. What was that other group that happened? It was a little different. That TV show that they had the Christian children up there, and then the brother was sexually abusing his own sister. Ugh. The work for whom he babysat. The leader who claims to be a god and a sinful messiah, like a barefaced messiah, has himself been accused of sexual abuse in civil lawsuits, which he settled out of court. You always gotta look side-eyed, but has never faced criminal charges. Isn't that something, you guys? Think it's a coincidence that T.D. Jakes has been named as one of P. Diddy's buddies? Time for wakey wakey. Sometimes children are killed during attempts to heal them. A couple and 2 young self-ordained preachers were indicted in 1985 in North Carolina for the choking death of a 4-year-old during a laying on of hands healing service at a storefront church. This attempt to rid the boy of a demon resulted, according to a medical examiner's report, in abrasions and fingernail marks on the boy's throat. Oh, God. And a crushed windpipe. Wow. In Louisiana in 1987, an 8-year-old Down syndrome girl was strangled to death while her mother was present in an attempt to exorcise evil spirits from her body. In 1986, a 10-year-old boy was starved and beaten with sticks by a fundamentalist Christian church. You guys see why I have no use for religion? His rest Christian fellowship that believed he was possessed by demons. Police said that a malnourished and abused child who has never been to school. How about that, LAPD? Isn't that wild? Is probably only one of many victims of the group's exorcism rites. Authorities also reported that the 19-year-old son of another member of the church was beaten and cut with knives in a purification ritual by other members when he tried unsuccessfully to run away. Poor baby. Oh my gosh. Sometimes children are murdered in cultic groups. 6 members of a polygamous sect notorious for doctrine calling for the deaths of apostates were indicted in federal court in the 1988 slayings of 3 men and an 8-year-old girl. There's that 3 and 8 again. You see 3 men and 8, that's 38. In Texas, the group's founder, Everett LeBaron, died in 1981 while serving a sentence in Utah for the 1977 murder of rival polygamous leader Rulon Allred. In 1990, Daniel Kraft Jr. admitted in a Cleveland court to assisting in the slayings of a family of 5 and told of the scriptural plan that drove a band of religious zealots to commit murder. Dennis and Cheryl Avery and their 3 daughters were killed on a rural Ohio farm under the orders of prophet Carl Lundgren, with whom they had become disenchanted. Kraft testified that can it be more in your face? Kraft, hello, testified that the killings were a required religious sacrifice. What I say, made necessary because of Avery's disbelief in Lundgren as a prophet. Lundgren was sentenced to death in the case. Treatment issues. We know very little about the psychological treatment of children who have left cults. This was a long time ago. No systematic study of children's post-cult psychological picture has been conducted. Very little clinical work has been reported on. That's on purpose, you guys. The suggestions that follow are based more on reasoning than experience. Essentially, we are saying we know A, about cults. We know B, about child development. We would expect, based on our knowledge of A and B, that children leaving cults would exhibit C and require treatment D. Therefore, we urge the reader to be very cautious in applying the following approach to the treatment of children who have left cults. Heed the dictum. Treat each case individually. Adult or young adult cult joiners have a more or less mature personality before they enter the cult, probably because they were abused. Note in the introduction to this book, they may develop a cult pseudo-personality in order to adapt to the intense and conflicting demands of the group. Leaving a cult and recovering from the experience requires, among other things, an awakening of the pre-cult personality. Like, who did you used to be? Go check out Janja Lalik's book. I can't think of the name right now. She explains how to get out of it. Really, really good book. Children born in cults or brought into cults at an early age do not have a mature pre-cult personality to awaken. They are socialized into an environment that denigrates independent critical thinking. What would LRH do? What would LRH think? Members in a state of dependency and fosters a private insecurity by attacking members while demanding that they not protest, and show a positive front to the world. Oh, today is a great day to be a Scientologist. Thus, the cult environment can create an anxious, dependent personality. Just what they want. This is a pseudo-personality, ergo the rapid and large decline in dependency after cult rehabilitation. People who join cults as adults learn a great deal about the mainstream world before they join. They may be indoctrinated into a bizarre belief system with bizarre practices, but if they leave, they can call upon their pre-cult knowledge about the world in their attempts to adjust to mainstream society. Children raised in cults have little knowledge about the world, just like they want it, especially if their group was isolated. Therefore, when they leave a cult, even if its practices and beliefs were highly deviant, they will take the cult's worldview with them because they know no other. Hence, their capacity to think critically and act independently may be deficient, not merely blocked, as may be the case with ex-cultists who joined as units. Ironically, those children who were most uncooperative in the cult, those who rebelled, may be most likely to make an effective transition into mainstream society because they will not have imbibed the group's worldview so completely as others. That reminds me of Nathan Rich. And also Jenna Miscavige, like she was always questioning and her story is just sad to me. But she's doing well now. Let's see, where am I here? Okay. The picture painted above suggests that persons raised in a cult will experience culture shock upon leaving. Also reminds me of when I got out of the army. Whatever the reason. Moreover, their capacity to negotiate the transition successfully is likely to be hampered because the society they are entering places a premium on critical thinking and independence, both of which were settled in the cult. If they have also been physically abused or neglected, they may have medical problems and the residuals of psychological trauma, like Miriam Francis. Moreover, the family, the normal primary support system of children, may be unavailable or even part of the problem picture rather than part of the solution. How does one help such persons? Yeah, I think a lot of people need to ask that. First of all, medical attention may be needed. A complete physical examination should be performed as a precaution. The medical exam should include a thorough history, especially in regard to abuse and neglect. The examiner should keep in mind that experiences that we would readily identify as abusive may be perceived as the normal course of events to the former cultist. Yeah, because it's all they've known. Especially if he or she is still a child and has had little exposure to the non-cult world. Second, a long-term psychotherapeutic relationship will probably be advisable. The magnitude of adjustment confronting such ex-cultists, their limited capacities, and the likely lack of a social support system beyond the immediate family, if that suggests that much time and psychological support will be needed. Psychotherapy with these persons is not likely to be traditional. They will probably need immense educational effort, not only about how cults work, but about how the mainstream world works as well. Their education will have to include skill building, especially social skills, as well as cognitive learning. Many things that we take for granted may be alien to these former cult members. Third, these persons will also probably need socialization experiences. Socialization is different from education because it involves much more than systematic learning. It consists of a myriad of experiences through which people learn the unwritten rules and expectations of a culture. It is difficult to teach someone about thousands of minor rules, such as, to take an extreme example, the inappropriateness of asking a bus driver where one should sit. Individuals accustomed to years of totalism may be inclined to ask just such a question of someone they may perceive to be an authority figure, like a cop. To a great extent, ex-cultists born in cults must learn these types of rules and expectations through guided experience. Therapy can help with the guiding, but it cannot provide the real-life experiences. Very well written. Furthermore, unlike in traditional therapy, the therapist may not be able to assume that the ex-member client will necessarily encounter experiences from which to learn. Wait, where am I here? Sorry, guys. Unless the therapist actively encourages the client to seek out experiences that will contribute to socialization, the ex-member client may be likely to fall into a safe routine that limits his or her growth. The suggestions above apply more to adults or young adults who were born in a cult. Young children will not only seek therapeutic, educational, and socialization experiences, but will also need management as well. Someone will have to make sure that the various remedial interventions are coordinated and made sense to the child. Parents may be able to do this, although they may also be struggling with post-cult issues. Therefore, the therapist or some other helper may be called upon to function as an ombudsman, as the child's advocate. Investigation of this field has at times been upsetting. The abuses to which children have been subjected can be horrendous. The degree to which cult leaders can escape accountability by hiding behind the First Amendment is troubling, and the lack of concern and action about this problem is shameful. In this chapter, we have tried to shed light on this problem so as to make psychotherapists and other helpers more effective when they encounter children or adults born in cults. How about that, Scientology parents? Because of the number of adults and young adults who joined cults in the 1980s, the number of such persons will probably increase dramatically during the next 5 to 10 years as people born in cults leave. Our suggestions, however, are very preliminary. Consequently, if the helping professions are to deal effectively with this problem, we must learn more. As a minimum, we need well-articulated case studies, but we especially need to research this problem systematically. We need to survey child care workers, physicians, and others. We need to interview and survey former cult members. And we need to examine adults and children born in cults in a systematic, scientific manner. We hope that some of our readers will be inspired to take on some of these important tasks. Really good article or journal. I think it's actually from a book. It's a chapter from a book. So I will leave the link in the description box. You guys like and subscribe. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.